Welcome to English. Welcome to English 4E. This is term 2A and we are on class 3. Today we're going to be working on assignments K3 and K4, and we're going to be looking at nouns, pronouns, and verb tenses. And I am Jillian Percy. As always, here's the different ways to contact. If you want to talk to me right now while I'm in the studio, you can call 1-800-465-7144. If you want to listen in on the radio, 91.9 FM. Zoom is nnec-owen.ca.zoom.us/j/924-617-3555. You can also email me any questions at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org, and my Facebook and YouTube are both the same. Capital G, capital P, ERCY, space WAHSA. And I always put the old classes onto YouTube so you can re-listen to one or listen to one you didn't catch the first time. Whenever you hand in work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca, and please include your full name, your course name, the assignment number and name, and label if it's the rough or the good draft. If you take a photograph of an assignment and send that, please send it as an attachment rather than in the body of the email. Okay, so today our work, and why does it keep doing this? My apologies, friends. I thought I had gotten that straightened out, but it does not quite seem to be. I'm not sure why it needs to log me out constantly. Hang on a sec. Sorry, I know it's boring just listening to me type. I could sing a song, but that probably would not enhance your experience of this course. I'm not that good a singer. Here we go. Okay, understand and identify 3 main types of verbs. Understand verb tense, mood, and aspect. Recognize 12 different types of verb tenses in English. Identify nouns and verbs in self-created sentences. And learn all about different types of pronouns and how they work with antecedents. And also identify pronouns and antecedents in self-created sentences. So a lot to do today. All right, so first of all, I'm going to read our key question, and then we're going to kind of talk about nouns and verbs so you understand how to do it. So key question number 3 is worth 5 marks, and in it, basically you just write 5 sentences of your own that show your understanding of nouns and verbs. Place an N over words that are nouns and a V over the words that are verbs. So quick review of nouns. Remember that nouns are any person, place, thing, or idea. Essentially, a noun is telling you the name of something. Nouns can be generic or common, like girl, tree, street, town, doctor, or mountain. They can also be a proper noun, which is the actual name of a specific person, and will have a capital letter at the beginning, like Tamara, Front Street, Kenora, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Ridley, Mount Everest. Now, a noun can occur at any place in the sentence. So be sure to label all your nouns with an N. And I'm saying this because we've been looking specifically at the subject and which nouns are the subject. And sometimes that gives people the idea that that means you're only going to find a noun at the beginning of the sentence, which just isn't the case. So here's an example of a sentence. The tired horse trotted slowly back to his stall in the old red barn. So horse is a noun, stall is a noun, and barn is a noun. So I've got to label all of those. I underline them as well, just so it was really easy to tell, but you don't have to do that. In the morning, I will be taking the bus to school for the first time. Now, there's 2 words in here that I didn't initially think of as nouns, which would be morning and time. One hint that it's a noun is the word the in front. So if I said the gray morning, gray wouldn't be the noun, but gray is describing morning. Morning is definitely a noun. Same thing, the first time, first is describing time. So time is also a noun. And then I think bus and school are more obvious. I is a pronoun, not a noun, so I'm not going to label it, okay? Ideas are the hardest types of nouns to recognize. Sometimes nouns like people and places and things are pretty easy. It's harder because it's abstract. It's not something you can reach out and touch. One thing to think about is whether the word is naming something rather than describing something or describing an action. If it's giving you a name, then it's generally a noun. So here are some examples of different types of abstract or idea nouns in different areas. So for scientific ideas, things like photosynthesis, gravity, force, flexibility, those are all a type of noun. Emotions, now not sad, but sadness, and not hate, but hatred. It's like it's naming the emotion rather than describing it. Excitement, curiosity. Different types of government systems, democracy, communism, socialism, monarchy, those are all nouns. Some geography terms, latitude, longitude, equator, time zone. Things in history, Confederation, rebellion, exploration, war. So those are often a little bit trickier to notice. Um, as you go along, you'll find it's easier to recognize that those are nouns as well. So we are also going to talk about verbs. There are three main types of verbs. And the one we learn in school is usually that verbs are action words, like jump, dream, move, and swoop. So those are examples, and they all are, but that's like a very limited definition. It's only one part of what verbs are. Those particular verbs also can be changed slightly by adding endings. I could add an S that is showing whether it's a plural or a singular verb. I can add ed to show that it occurred in the past. I can add ing to show that it's occurring right now. So the word jump could also look like jumps, jumped, or jumping. Dream can become dreams, dreamed, dreaming. Move can become moves, moved, moving. And swoop can become swoops, swooped, swooping. Right. So the second type of verb are verbs that are helping or linking verbs. And often they help show whether a verb is occurring right now or in the future, or if maybe the action is only a possibility. And these would get marked with a V as well. So for example, if I say, I am running, we all recognize running as a verb, but am is a helper verb. So it has to be labeled as well. If I say, I have been playing piano since I was 6 years old, I would have to include have been because they are verbs telling me it happened in the past. I have been playing. Now, there's also a verb I forgot here. Can you guys see it? Okay, this is a two-part sentence, right? It's a compound or complex sentence. So in the first clause, that's my verb phrase. But over here, since I was 6 years old, was is also a verb. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because um, some people automatically write simple sentences, which are a little bit easier to find, but some people automatically write in more complex or compound sentences. And what happens then is we notice the verbs at the front. We don't always notice the verbs that come in the second clause. So that's something to be aware of if you're making your sentences, okay? Some common helping or linking verbs. To be can work out too. Am, is, are, was, were, have been, has been, will be, and just thinking about this, we also would have had been. So those are all helping verbs. For the verb have, we got have, has, had. For do, we have do, does, did, done, and doing. Will is pretty easy because it kind of sounds the same. Will be, or will have been. Now, there are also some special helping verbs that are called modal or sometimes auxiliary verbs, and they can help show a sense of possibility or obligation. And these verbs are might, should, could, would, must, need, may, can, will. So if I've got a sentence like, I could have come over if I knew you wanted company, where are the verbs there? There's a whole bunch right here at the beginning. I could is my modal one, have is a helper, and come would be my action one. So I'm going to underline all those. And I would make sure to put a V above all three so that there was no doubt in my teacher's mind that I understood that all of those counted. Let me just move this up so we can see it a little more clearly. My apologies. One of the dangers of this. Okay, there we go. Now, is that all my verbs? If I knew you wanted company. Okay, there's a couple more verbs here. Knew is another action verb. So I'm going to underline it. Wanted. Wanted is another verb. So we've been doing very simple sentences where there might be only one verb. I wanted to make sure to show you as you're writing more complex sentences, you're going to end up with a lot more verbs, right? So here we've got 5 verbs in this sentence. And a lot of times we can get trapped into thinking one sentence, one verb, we find the first verb and we stop looking. So it's really important as you're writing these to keep on looking for verbs that could be action, verbs that could be helping, and we're going to tackle one more type of verb. I feel like these are the hardest ones to recognize. These are called state of being, or sometimes they're called a condition verb. And the reason is because these verbs will connect the subject, the noun or the pronoun, to words that describe its condition. And the main state of being verb is to be, which is, am, are, was, were. So if I say the car is old and broken, is isn't really an action, but it's tying the car to these adjectives. The car is in the state of being old and broken. The house was freshly painted. Ooh, there's a mistake here, but anyways, was is actually part of painted here. I didn't even notice that when I first did it. Now hang on. You could use this as an adjective. We're going to use it as an adjective in this sense. Painted is describing what the house looked like. Freshly is describing how recently it was painted. The students were grateful for the pizza. Were is the verb. Grateful is student. So I could say the grateful students ate the pizza or something like that too. So be mindful of these state of being verbs. They're harder to recognize. There are a few more unusual verbs that sometimes work as a state of being verb. Now, it doesn't matter that you know what it's called. It just matters that you recognize that it is a verb in your sentence, because I do ask you to check that. Like when you're editing your work, can you please make sure that every sentence has a verb? If you're not sure that these are verbs, then you may look at a sentence and think it's wrong when actually it's right. So tadpoles become frogs. The birds seem hungry. The mist appeared above the water. She still believed in Santa Claus. The pebbles feel sharp. And a lot of those, they aren't really working as an action. They certainly aren't helping verbs. They're more or less just telling you what the subject is doing, is their state, their condition. Again, it doesn't matter that you know what it's called, but I do want you to be aware that those ones sometimes are tricky because they look at them and they're like, I don't know, is that really an action? What is that? Now, English is got 12 verb tenses in the English language. Different languages have different types of verb tenses. It can help to be familiar with these verb tenses to locate the verbs. Oh, we've got a student. Hang on a sec. Hello there. How are you doing? All right. So whoever this is, they can now see my screen. If you decide you want to ask me a question, by all means, I'm just going to shrink this so it doesn't block the page. Verb tenses can show whether an action occurred in the past, the present, or the future. The verb mood can state a fact or ask a question, give a command, or express a wish, demand, or suggestion. And the verb aspect can show the completion of the verb, whether it's a continuous action or it's a completed action or the end of a continuous action, or simply just a fact that it occurred. Now, again, I don't need you to know every single type of verb tense, but I do want you to recognize them so when you're writing, you're sort of aware whether it's correct or not because you've seen it before. In most cases, the verb is going to use helping verbs that show these different states of being. And remember that the helping verbs are the one we sometimes find tricky. I'm going to just kind of flip in a little video here because I thought they explained it really well. Let me just see if this works properly. Hang on.
The verb tense tells you when the verb happened. There are 12 verb tenses: past, present, and future, and these have categories which are simple, perfect, continuous, and perfect continuous. Here is an overview of all of the verb tenses. Past simple. This tense is used to describe an action that has already happened. The structure is the subject plus the verb in a past form. For example, I walked to work today. She arrived late to school. I ate my lunch in the cafe. I saw my friend in the shop. It's important to note that irregular verbs have different past forms. For example, eat, ate, eaten. Past perfect. This tense is used to describe an action that was finished before another past action. The structure is subject plus had plus verb past participle. For example, I had finished my homework to give to my teacher, but she had already left. He had visited China. My mum hadn't packed my lunch, so I had to prepare it myself. Past continuous. This tense is used to describe an action that was ongoing. This action may have been interrupted or another action also occurred. The structure is the subject plus was or were plus a verb ending in ing. For example, I was working all day to finish my homework. We were walking home when my mum called me. He was waiting an hour when the bus finally arrived. It's important to note that with I, she, he, it, we use was. We, they, you, we use were. Past perfect continuous. This tense is used to describe an action that started in the past and continued till another action or time in the past. The structure is the subject plus had been plus a verb ending in ing. For example, it had been raining all day, so I couldn't walk to work. We had been looking for my phone for 1 hour when Jasmine found it under the sofa. She had been preparing dinner when I arrived home. Present simple.
I'm going to take a quick break on that and come back to it. And we're going to kind of move on here. Okay, remember that for this question, which is K4, you're going to need to mark both the nouns and the verbs. And these two parts of speech are generally going to form a fair bit of your sentence. Remember, you're not going to mark the articles. The articles are the, a, or an. They do not count as part of the noun. You also don't want to mark any adjectives that are describing the noun. So for example, if your sentence starts with the old gray house, you would only mark the word house with an N, not the words old, gray, or the. Remember to mark all the nouns in the sentence, not just the subject, and be sure to mark all the verbs in the sentence. Be on the lookout for the helping verbs that we were discussing earlier. Oh, sorry, my computer froze a second there. There we are. Remember that compound or complex sentences will have at least two subjects and verbs. So a compound sentence, remember we join two sentences together. I like the new boy. So here's my verb. There's a noun. Now I've got a new sentence. So I'm going to have another verb at least. I hope he asks me out. Now this one doesn't have a whole lot of nouns because they use pronouns, and we're not going to mark the pronouns. Complex sentence is when you join a dependent clause, which is a sentence that can't stand on its own, and an independent clause that can. So again, you're going to have a lot more nouns and verbs in there. Although I moved to this town a few months ago, I am still finding it hard to make friends. So we don't mark as a pronoun, but here's my verb, moved. Town is a noun. Months is a noun. Now we're on the second part, right? The second clause. We're not going to mark as a pronoun. Am is a verb. Still is our adverb. Finding it is another verb, so we mark it. Finding it hard to make. Now, this is the only one where you could conceivably mark the to as part of the verb as well. In this case, to is normally considered a preposition, but to make is considered like the infinitive form of verbs, which is kind of hard to explain. It's sort of based on how English is translated from Latin. So for this particular format, I'm not going to worry about whether you only mark the word make or if you remember to mark the to. I wouldn't mark that as wrong. It's a little tiny bit fussy. And then the word friends would also be a noun. So that's something to be careful of when you're doing your own sentences. Okay, moving on to question number 4. Key question number 4 is talking about antecedents and pronouns. Again, this question is only worth 5 marks, but it's trying to make sure that we understand a certain concept. A pronoun is a word that can take the place of a noun, and an antecedent is the word or group of words to which the pronoun is referring. The antecedent is usually a proper noun. Now, I'm going to disagree with that. That's what the unit material says. It can easily be a common noun. But these two aspects, the pronoun and the antecedent, have to be in agreement. So like I couldn't say Mr. Hardy showed up for class and she taught me this because I'm confusing things. Like one, I'm giving him a male name and then I'm referring to him as a girl. I have to kind of pick which one he's going to go by, right? Also, you'd have to keep in mind plural versus singular, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So after Carrie washed the dishes, she went out to see a friend. So Carrie is the initial topic of the sentence. She's our antecedent. Now, when I say she, I'm referring back to Carrie. If I had two girls, if I said Carrie and Susan, I couldn't use the word she because I wouldn't know whether I was talking about Carrie or Susan, right? I could only use the word she because it's really obvious that there's only one girl in this sentence. So when they're talking about them being in agreement, they have to both kind of match each other, I guess is the best way to put it. They want you to write 5 sentences of your own that show your understanding of antecedents and pronouns. They also want you to make sure that you underline the antecedents and the pronouns. Now, it's best if you can put it in one big sentence, but sometimes with how sentences work, you might have 2 short sentences. Like if I had said, Carrie washed the supper dishes, period, she went out to see a friend, period. The she is still referring to the Carrie in the previous sentence. It's just you want to keep them kind of close together. If you had 2 really long sentences, it might be confusing as to who she was referring to. All right. So what we were talking about, pronouns must agree or essentially be the same as their antecedents. So if a noun is singular, you need to use a singular pronoun to refer back to it. And then if the noun is plural, you need to use a plural pronoun to refer back to it. The plural forms they, them, their, themselves can be used for either several males, several females, also mixed groups. It could be used even, some people would use it for animals, some people would use they. Currently, it's also considered like one of the gender options, and that's fine. You just would have to kind of stick with it, right? We can't switch back and forth. You got to pick one and kind of stick with it in the sentence. Usually, we use it for inanimate objects in the singular. Like I said, I put the pen on the table, it rolled off. That makes perfect sense. But if I said I put a handful of markers on the table, I would usually not say it, I would say they rolled off at that point because it's plural. There isn't really a plural for it in English. Um, Pronouns should also agree with their gender. I know this is kind of a controversial thing here. So this isn't talking about, people's gender identity. At that point, you would use whatever people are asking you to use, obviously out of respect. But in this case, if if there's a female being referred to earlier, then you continue to keep them female in the other part of the sentence. If they go by male in the first part of the sentence, you would continue to keep them male. If they prefer the pronoun like they or them, that's fine. Then you would also continue to refer to them as they, them in the second part of the sentence. It's just kind of a matter of making sure people aren't getting confused. Occasionally people have like newly created pronouns to express their gender identity. There's things like j'ai and j'aime and that kind of thing. In that case, just ask them what they want to use. And then again, you would consistently use it. That's basically the idea, is just that you're being consistent. You're using the same thing each time, so people aren't getting mixed up. All right, subject pronouns. These are generally used in front of a verb, and they can serve as the main subject for a sentence. So singular or one is I, you, he, she, and it. For plural, we would use we, you, and they. And like we talked about, there isn't really a plural form for it, so we often use they. Here are some examples. When Karen went to the movies, she always sat at the front. If Dad gets today off work, can he take us on a picnic? So he refers back to the dad. The squirrel buried its nuts. Now it can't find them. Now I kind of underlined this as well. In this case, it's is possessive. It's showing that the nuts belong to the squirrel. It is not showing that it's plural. The S does not mean plural here. It's more like if I said, those are John's boots, and that means the boots belong to John. In this case, the S is meaning the same kind of thing. So it is referring back to squirrel. Again, if I'd said the squirrels buried their nuts, now they can't find them, and I would switch it. Them here is referring to the nuts, right? Nuts is plural, so is them. I could obviously underline these two as well. Probably should. I didn't because I was really focused on the squirrel at that point. My whole class is going to the zoo. Then we are going to McDonald's to eat. So class is a plural form, right? So all of the people are going to eat, not just one member. The football team is getting on the bus. They are playing out of town today. Again, it's not one football player, it's the whole team, so I'm using the word they. Generally, the antecedent comes before the pronoun that refers back to it. There are some exceptions. Every now and again, somebody might do a complex sentence where they put the pronoun first and then the person's name, but I was worried that'd be a bit confusing. You're going to see the name first or the noun first and then the pronoun way more often. So I'm just kind of sticking to that right now. These are the object pronouns. So these are not going to come before the verb. You won't see these at the beginning of a sentence. They're going to come after the verb, not necessarily right after, but after. They're receiving the action. And again, there's a singular and there's a plural. Singular is me, you, him, her, and it. Plural is us, you as plural, and them. And again, there's not really a plural form of it. We just use the word them. So here are some examples. The first one, I did it in the two sentence format so you could see it. David is kind of a bully. I don't like him much. I don't know why I have the word verb there. I don't like him much. Now, in the case of this question, this counts as one sentence. I could turn it into one this way. David is kind of a bully and I don't like him much. And that works too. When mom yells at me, I get mad at her, and her refers back to mom. The thunderstorm last night was very scary, and it even knocked over a tree in our backyard. Now, it is referring to the thunderstorm because there's only one storm, right? My family brought our bikes with us to the campsite. So here, us has to be linked to family. If I had said, I brought my bike, I wouldn't usually say with us to the campsite unless it was clear earlier that you were with more than one person, right? Reflexive pronouns. These aren't used as often, but they do come up. Usually these are used when the person who is doing the action also receives the action, which sounds a bit weird. I'm just going to talk about the forms, then we'll kind of show you what I mean. Singular is myself, yourself, herself. Now, depending on where you are, I've seen his self or himself. I think himself is more correct, but I have seen his self used as well. Itself, and then plural, ourselves, yourselves. Now, see here, usually you and you are the same, but because it's plural, instead of using the F, which is a singular form, we use VES, which is the plural form. Same thing for themselves. And again, if we had an inanimate object and it was plural, we would switch over to using themselves. So pronouns need to agree in terms of number, gender, and persons versus object. So I could say Susan made herself some lunch. So she's making it, but she's also making it for herself. My dad fixed the car himself. We painted the house ourselves. The dog broke his chain all by itself. Now here, because I've used it, I should fix this. I shouldn't leave it as his because that's confusing. I could say the dog broke its chain. Or if I felt strongly that I wanted to refer to him, I could say the dog broke his chain all by himself. Again, either way is right as long as I'm consistent. It's and itself or him, no, his and himself. The kids took themselves to the mall on their bikes. And again, kids themselves and their are all plurals. I took myself shopping on my payday. And again, they just agree with each other. Okay, let's take a look at the next thing. Hang on a sec. Where are we at? Okay, good. Possessive. This was coming up as we were talking. I just wanted to kind of mention it specifically if you wanted to. Some pronouns are used to show that something belongs to a certain noun. And these again should agree with the number, gender, and animate versus inanimate status of the noun. So singular possessive pronouns are my, your, her, his, and its. And plural, our, your, and their. Again, its, even though it has the S, is considered singular. If I actually had plural, I would switch over to using their, even if it was an inanimate object, okay? I brought my favorite markers to art class, so I and my match. Did you get your coat that I dropped off with your brother? And again, they all match. My sister got her birthday money from grandma. The teacher wore his best suit for graduation. Now, this is one of those ones that might be tricky, okay? I'm using his because I'm assuming this particular teacher is a man. But if it was a girl, I would change it and have her. Okay. Now, if this is one where the teachers decided that they want to be identified as they, their, then I would switch it and I would use their. Now, technically, there's that confusion of singular versus plural, but right now this is considered respectful. And so you would do what they asked, right? Otherwise, you would make sure it matched. but respect comes before the finicky thing of it matching properly. Okay, so don't worry about that part. Uh, the teacher wore, we'll put her best suit this time for graduation. The dog licked its dish clean. Again, some people they like to refer their animals as his or her. So if somebody said the dog licked his dish clean, that's fine too. We brought our canoe to the cabin, and the class was glad when their flowers grew so well. Okay. Remember that there is used for anything. It could be used for a group of boys, group of girls, group of mixed. It's used for groups of inanimate as well. It's just kind of a generic one indicating that there's more than one. We don't have a pronoun that shows these are all plural males or these are all plural females. I know some languages do. It just doesn't exist in English. Okay. Does the pronoun agree with its antecedent or not? Remember, the antecedent is going to be the noun or pronoun that comes earlier in the sentence. So Mrs. Wyndham brought his new car home from the dealership. Does that agree or does that disagree? Well, Mrs. Wyndham is a girl and his is intended as a boy. So I would have to say at this point, it's a disagree. It doesn't work. I'm just going to underline it here. When my sister goes away to college, I will miss her. So her is referring to sister. Do they agree or do they disagree? In this case, it agrees. They're both singular and they're both female. My brother drove themselves to the movies. Does themself agree with brother? In this case, no, because brother is singular. So it disagrees. It is not correct. I would have to fix it if I was having that in my writing. My sister and I painted the house ourselves. Does ourselves match my sister and I? Yes, because this is a plural noun because I'm using two people, right? Each noun is singular by itself, but I'm talking about them together. So I use the plural pronoun. So that one agrees. The train stopped on their tracks. There is referring to train. Does that agree or does it disagree with its antecedent? In this case, it disagrees, right? There is plural, train is not, so that is not correct. The car lost its power steering. Does its agree with car or disagree? This is a tricky one. Some people see the is and think the s and think, well, it must not agree because s means plural. But remember, we talked about how s in this case just means that it belongs. So it is generally considered a singular pronoun. So yes, it does match car, and that one is fine. That agrees. You don't have to fix that at all. If I am not home when you arrive, please leave my package in the mailbox. Does my agree with I? Yes, I and my match. They're both singular. So that one agrees. Again, I know this is kind of finicky stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that can sometimes be confusing when you read if it gets mixed up because there's something like, oh, wait, I thought the person was this, and all of a sudden they're there, and that kind of thing. Now, these are indefinite pronouns. You're not going to use these for your sentences, but I wanted you to know that they exist because they will show up in sentences and also because I want you to know don't use these for this particular assignment because they don't really work for our assignment. They don't have to have an antecedent, and that's the reason why. Now, they can be used with an antecedent. Indefinite pronouns are not necessarily referring to any specific person or thing. Some are only used with people, and others could be used with either people or things. So here is a list of some singular indefinite pronouns. Oop, got pronoun spelled with an extra U there. My apologies. Another, anybody, anyone, anything, each, either, everyone, everything, neither, nobody, no one, nothing, other, somebody, someone, something, everybody, or one. Now, a lot of these, it's easy to tell it's referring to one. The one I think might be confusing is everything, but it is still a singular. Here are plural indefinite pronouns. These ones I would only use if I'm talking about more than one of something, both, few, many, others, or several. These ones are not only indefinite, but they can be for either singular or they can be used for plural. All, any, more, most, none, some, or such. In this case, these particular pronouns would generally be used, well, they could be used as a subject or as the object, right? But again, they don't have to have an antecedent, so you don't have to worry about that part. Okay. Yep, I like this. This is one where they're kind of doing what we just did. Um, it's a good idea to just kind of walk through this because it can be really helpful to understand this. And I think it can be a tricky thing because again, not every language does this the same way, right? We've talked about how different languages show different
Let's look
parts
at
of
an
grammar.
example. At first, Jim hesitated, but then he agreed to join us. He is a pronoun. And in this sentence, the antecedent of the pronoun he is Jim. He, properly in this sentence, refers back to Jim.
Now, we don't have to put the little line, just so you know.
This is a helpful chart here of personal pronouns. These personal pronouns, I, we, you, him, her, it, your, yours, are categorized under the following using the following factors. The number, whether the personal pronoun is singular or plural. So for example, I is singular and we is plural. The person, whether the personal pronoun is first, second, or third person. For example, a first person pronoun is I, a second person pronoun singular is you, and the third person singular pronoun is he, she, or it. The gender of the pronoun, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neutral. For example, he, of course, is masculine, she, of course, is feminine, and it is neutral. And the pronoun case, whether the pronoun is a subject in the sentence, an object in the sentence, or whether the personal pronoun is used to indicate possession.
Okay, just want to stop it to talk about, remember that these days they is often also used as a neutral third person singular. So that is considered appropriate these days as well, just so you're aware. That's one of those things that's changed in the last 5 to 10 years. So that's fine. Languages are a growing, changing thing. So just be aware of that.
Let's look now at pronoun antecedent agreement. Pronouns must match their antecedents in terms of being either singular or plural. Let's look at an example that's incorrect. Women today have many more options open to her than ever before. Her is a pronoun, and the antecedent of the pronoun her in this sentence is women. Her is referring back to women. And we have a problem here because her is singular and women is plural. So they don't match. So let's fix this sentence. Women today have many more options open to them than ever before. Them is a pronoun that's plural. It's referring back to women, its antecedent, which is also plural. So this is correct. If we make both of these singular, the noun and the antecedent, the noun woman, and the pronoun her, this is how the sentence would read. A woman today has many more options to her than ever before. Again, this is correct. Her, the pronoun, matches its antecedent, woman. They're both singular.
So I really like this because he's showing you, sometimes people, when they're worried about a sentence being wrong, they think there's only one way to fix it. And he's showing you there's two different ways you could fix this. You could make them both singular, or you could make them both plural. And I think that's really important to know. Like when we're fixing sentences, there's often multiple ways you can make it correct, but it's easier to do if you understand what part is not quite working. All right, a few more examples because we've got a little bit
Example
more
number
time.
2. A student who wants to pass should do all of their homework. Here, there is a pronoun, and it's plural. Student is its antecedent. There is referring back to student, and student is singular. Therefore, they don't match. Again, to fix this sentence, a student who wants to pass should do all of his or her homework. Instead of there, we're going to say his or her. His or her is considered singular, and so is its antecedent student. If we made both plural, students who want to pass should do all of their homework. Again, there is a plural pronoun, and students, its antecedent, is also plural. So that's correct. They match. Example number 3. Neither of them has submitted their assignments. Now this is incorrect. Even though it sounds correct, it's not correct. There, the pronoun there, is plural. The indefinite pronoun neither or neither is actually considered singular. Now, this is so therefore, they don't match. Okay? There is plural, neither is singular, they don't match. So we have a pronoun antecedent disagreement here. So how do we know that neither, an indefinite pronoun, is singular? Because it's not obvious. We're not sure if it's singular, we're not sure if it's plural. Could it be both? Well, we have a list. Here's an indefinite pronoun list. And when you come across an indefinite pronoun, you have to go to this list to see if it's singular. Words like anyone, anybody, anything, each, either, every, neither.
So obviously you're probably not going to refer to a list every single time you write a sentence, but after a while you do get kind of used to which one is singular and which one's not. The one thing I don't know if he mentions is why it's so tricky. I'm going to kind of pop back here. Oops, no. Okay, if you take a look at there, it seems to match them. The problem is of them is actually more like an adjective phrase describing neither. So that's where it gets tricky. So here he's kind of corrected it as neither of them has submitted his or her assignments, or both of them have failed to submit their assignments. And again, I like this because you can see he changed this sentence completely, but is still getting across the same idea. So whenever you're working with your own work, again, always keep in mind there is more than one way to fix or change something if you want to. Okay, I'm going to flip back to our regular stuff now. Okay, in tomorrow's class, we're going to be looking at assignment K5, which focuses on compound and complex sentences. If you've completed your other assignments, please remember to send them to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. If you don't have an email address that you currently use, every student gets one officially through our student system. If you're not sure what yours is, you can contact me in Facebook or call the office and you can find out what yours is. Or if you never really got one, we will set you up with one. And it's just because it can be really, really useful to have that to complete your assignments. I know I've got one participant. Before we close the day, does anybody have any questions about any of the assignments? Is there any confusion? Okay, so everyone's good. We're all set. All right, if that changes, I am still here in the office until 1:30. If anybody wants to give me a phone call, just a quick reminder that my office number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. And again, always there's email, which I check constantly throughout the day. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was nice to have company, even if they're very quiet. And hopefully I'll be able to talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.